All right, we're back again with the FMT, a 94 F-150 truck that we worked on a while back. We put a 302 with a carburetor and HEI distributor in it, along with a 5-speed manual, more or less turning this modern truck into an older version like that truck without any real electronic control crap in it. But what we're going to be doing is, well, same way we did a transmission swap in that truck, we're going to do it here. The C6 that came out of that truck will be going in this truck, so it'll be a more easily drivable truck because, well, I plan on selling this thing. Why? Got too many friggin' trucks and cars and stuff as it is. Something's got to go. So the automatic's going in here, and just like with that truck there, we're going to have to pull all the stuff off in order to put that transmission into that truck right there. So give me a second. Taking away from the lower clearance on this truck, we're going to just pop this transmission off and slide it out from underneath. But just like on the other truck, we got to start off with a few things, namely the transmission mount, cross member, drive shaft, that has to come out. And in our case, the shifter is going to have to be removed from the transmission, so when we get it down on the ground, we'll be able to get it out easily. And the clutch master cylinder, which is attached to the slave cylinder in the transmission, will also have to come out, all as one piece. So there's several little things that we're going to have to disconnect, so might as well go on and get started. Probably the first thing is going to be this drive shaft, one of the easier things, and then the transmission mount, then the cross member. So let me get to work with this stuff. All right, we got our cross member and transmission mount removed. Cross member's right there. And I even took the liberty of pulling off the 6 bell housing bolts. I'm still gonna have to get under the dash and disconnect the clutch master cylinder and route it to a safe spot, so when the transmission is pulled free from the back of the engine, I won't damage the oil line from the master cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick, get under the dash. All right, we have our clutch master cylinder arm disconnected from the linkage on the pedal assembly here. The last thing is going to be to pull the bolts off so I could actually free the master cylinder completely from the firewall. So then we can move on to popping the transmission free. Let's go. All right, we got our transmission broken free from the back of the engine, currently resting on the jack. Just gonna need to give it a little more movement to get it to the ground, and then work the thing from under here, probably just like on the other truck, work it to the back where the frame rail goes up some, and then just wiggle the sucker out, and from there we'll start moving on to the removal of the clutch and flywheel, start getting all this other stuff out of here so we can make preparations for our C6. With the 5-speed slid out from the back as stated before, I managed to get the C6 in place the same way. I had to remove the torque converter to shave a lot of weight off this thing that's still pretty heavy. And with a bunch of 2x4 blocks, a scissor jack, crowbar, and a piece of a fence picket, I was able to get things staged enough where I could lift this transmission up high enough with a minimum of physical effort on my part in order to get the bell housing situated on the top of the jack, so I could then slide the transmission forward and get the pan right there sitting on top of the jack. So now our transmission is staged on the jack and with the torque converter back in place, because like I said, transmission's pretty heavy, and with the transmission on the jack, I could safely put the torque converter back in there without worrying about having to lift this thing up. Another thing also, we got the old clutch assembly and flywheel removed, and in its place we have our flex plate bolted up. And just like with the clutch flywheel, the crankshaft bolts are torqued down to 80 foot-pounds. That's all said and done. So now I can go ahead and start working this thing in place and get it situated on the back of the engine. So stand by. You might be wondering, how did I get the pilot bearing out of the crankshaft in order to be able to get the torque converter all the way in here? Well, unlike all the other tried and true ways, I didn't have access to tools or dowel rods that were snug enough to try to hydraulically remove the bearing with axle grease. So between the use of a chisel and hammer and a wide drill bit, I more or less destroyed the bearing, which is not going to be used anyway. But yeah, pretty much totally tore it up in order to get the thing out. So with that all said and done, let's get the transmission in. All right, we got the transmission bolted up to the back of the engine. Torque converter nuts are secured, so all that's good. Only thing is, I'm gonna have to get another transmission mount because the other one was kind of jacked. So while I wait for a moment to get said transmission mount, can't do nothing with our cross member, but I did go and take a moment to put the starter in. Now I'm going to work on our shifter cable, which was removed from the F250. Have to bolt all that up to the side of the transmission, route the kick down cable to the top of the engine, and figure out a way to attach that to the carburetor, since this is actually for an EFI setup, and go ahead and get the shifter cable inside the dash hooked up, which also is gonna move over to reinstalling our steering column. This steering column was the one pulled from the 250 that has our column shifter and all that good stuff. So gonna have to get the column back in place along with all this other trash right here, and then we'll be able to hook up our shifter cable and the little indicator that goes in the dash. So I'll be pulling all that crap apart again. And while I'm in here doing all that, I might as well go ahead and change the pedal assemblies back around, put the regular brake pedal assembly in here, and remove our clutch brake pedal. So, yep, time to tear some more crap apart. All right, we got everything back together in our dash steering column area. I had to do everything in stages because certain things had to go in first before I could move forward to other things. Before I could get our indicator in place, I had to get the shifter cable in place first. That thing locks in. I don't know if you could see it. That cable right there is snapped in right here on this bracket on the steering column. That had to go in first because the steering column, once it's in place, there's no going in there to do anything. So had to get that locked down before I partially mounted the steering column. Then I at least had enough area to work with to get our indicator mounted up to the gauge cluster, because the little cable is pretty short. So once all that was put together, I could mount the gauge cluster back in along with the dash trim and panels down there, all that garbage. Had to neaten up a couple wires that were added when I added this gauge set right there. So at least all that is straight, and our indicator pretty much works. Doesn't show 1, but nobody ever really shifts down to 2 and 1 like that. But that's all said and done. Next order of business is going to be the transmission oil lines. I'm going to have to fish those things around a bunch of crap to get them in place about where they would normally go. So let me get that out of the way. All right, we've got our transmission lines installed. Don't ask me for a tutorial on how to do that, because, well, there really isn't a good one to describe how to maneuver these bent lines through all the different angles to get them situated where they could be secured to the transmission as well as the radiator. But I managed to wiggle them in there through all the gaps and crevices between the engine and suspension members and all that, got them situated as best as I could. Another thing I did, because the brackets that were used to hold the lines together were no longer valid, I took short pieces of heater hose, slid them lengthwise to wrap around one of the metal lines, and then use that as a cushion to zip tie both lines together so they don't move or anything. Did the same thing right there where the lines go underneath or beside the oil pan on the engine. Let me go to the other end there. Also got a zip tie hose set up on the pair of lines going up to the transmission. Got everything secured as intended, just about where they normally would have been. So with that all said and done, my next order of business is going to be looking at the drive shaft. Still got to get my transmission mount, but in the meantime, drive shaft. The 5-speed manual going in the F250 required the drive shaft to be lengthened by a couple of inches, so it only makes sense that the C6 going in the FMT would need to be shortened by a couple of inches. I took the drive shaft, put it in place on the rear end, and lined up the front yoke with the tail of the transmission, and got that same couple of inches difference that I need to shorten this thing by. So I'd rather do it on the rear end here. I marked everything, so this amount of tube needs to be trimmed out. I have to cut the weld to get the yoke out, then trim the tube, put the whole thing back together, not welding of course, and put it all in the truck and put the gauges in place so I could go ahead and rotate the drive shaft so I could get the run out within tolerance, and then weld everything up temporarily so I could get to a strong welder and permanently burn that thing in place. So with that all said and done, go ahead and get the tools out and start cutting. Just like on truck stang 1, after trimming the drive shaft tube down, I put the yoke back on, not welded of course, and I bolt the whole thing up on the rear end, as well as putting the yoke inside the transmission like it would normally go. And then I put our dial indicator on there with the magnetic block and mount and all that crap, holding it on top of the tube there, so as we rotate the drive shaft, let me see if I can do this crap with one hand. As we rotate it, we want to see that gauge moving to indicate the run out play that we get from the drive shaft tube doing this number as it rotates. We don't want any of that. We want to get that number as low as possible, like 10 thousandths or something. So we want to be able to see this gauge barely move between 0 and 10, or at least within that range. So in order to do that, as I rotate it, I have to observe the range of swing on the gauge, try to find that medium, and then as I rotate it, slowly tap on the drive shaft to try to get the thing true, and keep rotating it until I get that run out number that I'm looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's probably going to take a while because it's a lot of trial and error, just small taps and rotations, small taps and rotations till we get it right. So stand by. To help make the dial indicator slide a little better, I squirted some WD on the thing, but so far from what we're getting, let's see, get a better, hold this better. Just about there, I would really say. We're probably around 12 thousandths, give or take. do a little more, try to get it a little bit better, and then I'll burn a few little welds on here to hold this crap in place, then check it again. All right, threw a couple of welds on the drive shaft temporarily, and let me get into a good position here to rotate this thing. We could see that our run out is still within that 10,000ths range, just within that 10,000ths range actually. So with that, I could go ahead and remove this shaft so I could take it and do a final weld on it and grind it down to make sure the weld is even, and then slap it back on here and ensure that the run out is still straight, and get a transmission mount in here still, and go ahead and test drive this pile. Stand by. All right, we got our drive shaft yoke welded on and all the excess slag that was present ground down so it's even all the way around. Check the run out to make sure it was still in tolerance, which it is, so that's all good to go. Things tightened down. Also managed to get my transmission mount in here finally, along with the cross member, so all that is snugged down. We're no longer on the jack. So now the next thing will be to throw some oil in this thing and crank this pile up and see what it does. Stand by. Unfortunately, my phone stands are crap, so I'm not even able to mount this thing steadily. The only one that works is the one that's holding the phone upright for our speedometer. But yeah, we're rolling along, and our drive shaft so far is cooperating. It's not hopping and bopping or anything. Gotta go slow going through this area, obviously. But of course, it's a little noisier than one would expect because of the idea that we have a hole in the floor still. So, yeah, it is what it is. My estimated RPM for this thing is probably around 2,500, which ain't too far from what the gauge is showing. It's kind of about where it was at in the F250. So, like I say, on the highway, this thing's probably going to be screaming pretty good. So, yeah, it is what it is. Gauges are still somewhat decent as far as readings. Shifted into third gear. Jumps into third around 30 miles an hour, which would be about normal. But again, with the gearing in this truck, it's going to start screaming a little more sooner than one would probably want.
third gear, about 33 miles an hour, give or take. Well, there it is. C6 transmission's working as designed, as it did when I pulled it out of that truck right there. We got the truck up to 50 miles per, and the engine was already revving around 2,500 RPM, pretty much the same as it did in that one. The rear end gearing's probably about the same between the two trucks, which is why I wanted the 5-speed in that one, because that's going to be my utility truck anyway, as it has been for the last 15 years. But this truck here is a pretty simplified setup. No EEC4 electronic engine control crap as was normally installed in these things. It's a plain old V8 with a HEI distributor and a carburetor, and of course the C6 transmission versus a E4OD transmission. But yeah, this is pretty much a new version of that truck right there. Literally the same thing, because that's a 302 with a carburetor and a plain old distributor and a C6 transmission. So, yep, there's nothing else to talk about on this thing. Well, wait, there is one more thing to talk about. The different gauges I put in here. A while back, I used to have a little cheap Chinese multi-gauge setup over the steering column. Wasn't a fan of it, and the fuel gauge thing didn't read accurate for crap. So I just put a regular fuel gauge on here that's synced with the sending unit that's in the truck now, and our normal voltmeter and temperature and oil pressure gauges. So all that stuff looks pretty normal as far as backyard modifications are concerned, and you're able to see that crap a lot easier than that other gauge anyway. So we have all our working gauges. Not the speedometer, of course, because I had to use that setup with the phone, but it's all good. Even the tack on the dash still works, or is at least very close to what I'm thinking the engine was revving at. But either way, there's nothing else left to do on this thing, other than plugging that hole up there. But I'll do that off camera, because nobody really wants to see me cutting carpet and welding or patching or doing whatever the hell I'm gonna have to do in there to cover that hole. But yeah, might play around with this thing some more, who knows. Probably gonna sell this thing because we got too many cars around here anyway. So till the next time, as usual, like, subscribe, notifications, TikTok, all that good crap, and stay tuned for more car crap, because, well, there's plenty more car crap to showcase around here. Too many friggin' cars. Gotta sell some of this stuff. But yeah, till the next time, I'll catch you later. I'm going inside. It's cold. I'm cold. I'm out.